arrows can get stuck in helmets, particularly the visors. But would that be a problem, and would it make it more difficult to get the helmet off? Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. Now, occasionally I get really good questions in the comments down below, and indeed I've been thinking about doing a kind of answer the viewers' questions video, which I'm happy to do soon actually. So if you want me to answer specific questions, you're always welcome to ask them in the comments down below. I'll have a little look and I'll see if I can put together a video compilation of answers for those. But Armour Bearer 9702 gave a really good question in one of my recent videos talking about helmets. Would it be a problem taking the helmet off if there was an arrow lodged in it? Well, first of all, let's just unpack that assumption first. So could an arrow get lodged in a helmet? Yes, absolutely, and nothing showed that better than Todd's arrows versus armour tests. So the simple fact is that these helmets, while they are very protective, in order to see and breathe, have to have openings. Now, with this type of helmet, I've got a vision slit here, and yes, here is a Will Sherman arrow, just like the ones used in arrows versus armour, and I'm going to close my eye, I can insert it into the hole there. So if you were really unlucky, an arrow could come in here, and I can tell you, with a fair amount of force behind it, it would probably compress the socket, split the wood or shave the wood down, and come in and quite potentially wound me in the face. And we actually have in Froissart's Chronicles, we actually have a description of the French knights at the Battle of Poitiers being worried about their visors of their helmets being penetrated by the arrows. Now, a lot of people use this as an example from a written source to describe penetration of armour by arrows, but probably because it specifically says visors, it means the holes. So you're not imagining that it's going to go through the steel here, but if it hits one of these holes, then potentially it could force enough of the metal in, or some of it, fragments of it even, you might get coming through into your face and into your eyes, which is clearly going to be potentially wounding, potentially fatal in some cases, and certainly really quite disconcerting and scary, I would imagine, when you've got loads of these things being shot at you. So absolutely, any type of helmet can get arrows lodged in the front. And the sallet, we talked about the sallet and bever. Now, on the surface of it, the great bassinet, as I'm wearing on my head at the moment, for hand-to-hand combat is a much more protective helmet. It's got better neck protection, it's one solid piece, it's a heavier helmet that can take heavy strikes. However, if you're receiving a lot of arrows to the front, it does have a lot of perforations because it needs the perforations in order to see and breathe. However, the sallet, which is you can tilt it or raise the visor, and it's got a bever which protects the lower part, actually has fewer openings. There were some sallets later on which had breaths in them, and so therefore they would make them a bit more like the great bassinet here. But as far as the standard sallet visor is concerned, it's actually more protective against arrows potentially. It's only got a vision slit in there, which an arrow could go into, but there's fewer holes. So yes, absolutely, an arrow could go into the front of your helmet, hits in the vision slit or breaths if you have them. It could wound you directly. But let's assume that the arrow sticks in and doesn't wound you. And as I demonstrate here, let's say it was a glancing shot and had bounced off someone else's pauldron or breastplate, it could absolutely come in here and get stuck, exactly like this. Okay, so does it prevent you from taking the helmet off? Well, the simple answer is no, unless it's hit you. Okay, so first of all, if it has hit you and if it's embedded in you, then you're going to have to take the arrow out before you can take the helmet off, because it's in you. Okay, so the answer is it depends. As my friend Scal likes to say, if it's sticking in some part of you, whether it's your jaw or your mouth or your cheek or your eye or whatever, the arrow would have to be extracted before the helmet could come off. Otherwise, taking the helmet off would do even more damage. But how would the helmet come off? Well, what's interesting is visors are usually movable. Not always, as we saw with the sallet, but usually. So if an arrow were stuck in here and was either in your body or not in your body, one option might be to unclip, if there is a locking mechanism, but there isn't always, to open the visor. Now what's interesting is if you look, I'll do it without the arrow in front of my eye. If you look at the direction that the visor goes up, the problem is it doesn't pull away from the face like this. So if it's in your face, it's going to wrench the thing upwards and do even more damage to you, which clearly you don't want. So the problem is you'd still have to get the arrow out before you could raise the visor. However, if the arrow is simply stuck in the visor, well, then you can just raise the visor, unclip the helmet, and take it off your head, no problem. Now let's have a little look at the sallet in contrast. Well, the first problem to contend with the sallet is that everything's closer to your face. So as we looked at in the previous video, because the slit is closer to your eyes, just having one slit, I've actually got okay vision. I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but it's not as bad as when the visor's further away from your face because of this narrowing, this tunneling effect. So because the slit's close to my eyes, I've got fairly good vision, but the slit's close to my eyes. So if an arrow hits here, deflects off someone else's armor, or just hits me directly in the face, I'm not going to stick that in very far, I can tell you, because that's really close to my eyes. I'll stick it in front of my nose. I can almost touch myself with it. Realise that sounds weird. But as it sticks in the slot, it's really close to my eyes. So with a sallet, although you don't have the breath holes, and remember there'd be a bever down here in front of my mouth, so that would deflect things off down here. Very unlikely to go through the bever, I would think, in most cases. But although I don't have any holes for this to gain purchase on, and most places this is going to hit, it's going to slide off when it hits. If it does hit that vision slit there, it's straight in my face. So this is a different proposition because there's a much larger probability that if it hits that vision slit, it's going to be in my body. Now at that point, I cannot take this helmet off if it's in my body. It will lock the helmet to my skull until I get that thing out. So that would have to be extracted before this could then be taken off the top of my head. Okay? However, if by some chance, say it was a deflecting shot, or maybe it was a high arcing shot that had come down and it just got slightly lodged in there, okay, and maybe went across the slot that way, maybe grazing my nose, but wasn't actually embedded in my face. If it was lodged in here, so long as it wasn't touching me, God, it's really close to my eyes, so long as it wasn't touching me, I could just take the whole helmet off like this, so it wouldn't bother me. So really, in a sense, although the two helmets are different and work in different ways and have slightly different functions, the answer to the question is kind of the same. It depends whether it's in your body or not. If the arrow has touched your body or is slightly in your body, you need to get the arrow out before you can get the helmet off. If it's not touching me, in most cases, no problem at all. I can just take the helmet off. So there we go. Armour Bearer, thank you for the question. It was a great question. And to everybody else who's watching, why not give me a load of questions down here? Because I used to do these kind of like five answers to viewers' questions and stuff, and they were fun videos to do because often you guys think of topics that I wouldn't have thought of by myself. So get posting down below any specific questions that you've got and ones that I'm able to give an answer to or that I think would be interesting enough to make a video about. Maybe I'll look at them in a future compilation video. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I have been Matt Easton and I will continue to be. Thanks again for your comments and see you soon. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.